In this video, we are going to walk through Losant Kiln. Losant Kiln is the easiest and quickest way to build a custom experience on top of your IoT applications. These experiences include user management, authentication, and the ability to build custom APIs based on your devices and data. All of this is managed and scaled within Losant. For this walkthrough, I'm going to create an application within Losant called Acme. Once created, we can access all of the Losant Kiln features within the Experience tab. We'll first need to give our new API a custom slug. This slug provides a unique URL for your API. You do have the option to change this later. For now, I'll just name mine Hello World. In order to best demonstrate experiences, Losant automatically creates a small example API for you. This example includes endpoints, users, workflows, groups, and authentication. Now let's take a look at everything that was just created. We'll first take a look at the favorite color endpoint. This endpoint by itself will return a random color every time you make a request. We can also pass in a color as a parameter to this route, which will return the same color. Let's try it out. To test this out, I am going to copy and paste this into an app called Postman. If you're not familiar with Postman, it's an application that lets you quickly test APIs. If we make the request, it will return a color. If we make the request again, it will return a random color each time. Also, because this endpoint accepts optional parameters, if I pass in red as a parameter, we'll get red back. Or if I pass in green, we'll see the same thing. Let's take a look at what goes on behind the scenes of this route. When your route was created, Losant also created a workflow. Each Experience API endpoint is powered by a Losant workflow. When this workflow is triggered, it determines what actions take place during the request and how the request will reply. Every workflow that powers an API endpoint will begin with an endpoint trigger and end with an endpoint reply. When this workflow is triggered, it first checks to see if a color was passed as a parameter. This check is done using the conditional node. If there was no parameter, it's going to take the left path, where we generate a random list of colors, pick a random index, set, and return that color. If a color was passed in as a parameter, we take the right path, where we set the color that was passed in and return that color. Now that we've seen the favorite color endpoint, let's take a look at the other endpoints created. To see all of the endpoints we created, we can go back to the Experience Overview page. As you can see, two more routes were created, Auth and Me. Let's take a look at Me. Each route has its own access controls. Me is only available to authenticated users. If we make a request to Me in Postman, let's see what happens. I'll update my route to Me. As you can see, we get an unauthorized message. To successfully authenticate to this route, we need to authenticate a user. If we go back to the dashboard, select Users, we already have a test user. When it was created, we generated a random password. You can find this password on the intro page. I'm going to copy that. To authenticate this user, we'll need to use the auth route. Notice that the auth route is a post request. Let's go back in Postman to use this route. First, I'm going to update it to a post, change my route to auth, but now we need to pass in a body. And in this body, we're going to give it an email address and password of the user we want to authenticate. Once I send this route, as we'll see, we'll get a token back. We can use this token to authenticate this user to our API request. To use this, let's update my route to Me, change this back to a GET, but now I want to pass in the token as a header. Now once I make the request, we'll see that Me has now returned the user that we authenticated to our API. The nice thing about experiences is that each API endpoint is powered by a workflow, so you get full control over every route and can customize it for your application. We can even change the Me route on the fly. If we select the Me route, we can see that it has a workflow associated with it. In this workflow, we can see how the me route is powered. So for example, let's say instead of returning the entire object of the user, we just want to return the email. We can do this by changing the reply node. As we can see in the reply node, it's returning the entire user object. So let's change this to email. And we can redeploy. Now that's deployed, let's go back to Postman and test out the route. With very little effort, we changed the functionality of the endpoint on the fly. Now that you guys have a basic understanding of Losant experiences, you should check out our Kiln Complete Guide, which is an example of a full end-to-end mobile application using Losant experiences. If you have any questions, please feel free to post a message onto the Losant forums. Thank you. Have a nice day.